Let us look at zoom and navigation in the sequence editor. The interesting thing in Blender is that it works the same way as in other 2D editors like the graph editor or the image view or anything like this. So, to start with, you can middle mouse click and drag to move around the view, to pan. This works on both axes, the X and Y axis at the same time. And if you only want to move on the frame range, you can either middle mouse click and drag and you go down and left and right. This tends to push the view down so you can move on the timeline. And you can also click and drag on the little timeline at the bottom of the window. Same thing for the channels. You can click and drag on the left on the channel range. Now, if I select everything so we can see the keyframes in the graph editor up there, it works the same way. Middle mouse click and drag to pan around, and you can click and drag on the range to move around the view. Now, the interesting thing is you can also control middle mouse and drag to zoom in and out depending on how you move the cursor. So if you move to the right, you're going to zoom in on the x-axis. If you move to the left, you zoom out on the x-axis. And same thing on the y-axis. Vertically, if you move the cursor up, it's going to zoom in, and down, it's going to zoom out. So you've got to get used to this, but if you move top right, you zoom in. If you move bottom left, you zoom out globally. This is very convenient because you can pan with middle mouse, and then you middle mouse click and drag with control, and you can zoom in quickly on some part of the frame range you want to work on. To reset the view, you can press the home key. Again, this works in any view, so if I go to the graph editor, it's going to work as well. There's one small thing to note about Blender is it's context dependent, so the shortcuts apply to the view the mouse cursor is in. So if you have your mouse cursor on another section of the interface, it's going to act on this part of the interface. If I click and drag on the if I click and drag on the graph editor, it's going to pan the view there. But if I go back to the sequence editor, it's going to pan in the sequence editor. So all shortcuts work this way, which is quite convenient because it means you can have the same keyboard shortcuts in different areas that do apply similar functions, but they don't collide with one another. The home key has one thing that's a bit particular. It zooms back to the largest of either all the strips in the editor, or if I go to another scene and press home, you can see it zooms to a section that's larger than my edit. The reason is it zooms to the frame range, which is larger than my entire edit. If I reduce the frame range like this and press home again, now it zooms to the sequences because that's the largest block, that's the largest element to zoom onto. You also have the dot shortcut. It's used in the 3D view for the camera, in the graph editor for everything. It's going to zoom on the selection. But look at this, this is very interesting because it zooms on the selection and it takes in account your active selected strip. That's the little one thing that's a bit strange at first. You've got to make sure that the active strip is part of the selection when you press the dot, and then Blender will zoom to it. This is quite convenient because it means you can quickly jump and focus on a section of your edit by pressing home. You make a selection and then press the dot, and you're going to zoom to it instantly so you can do your edits on this frame range. By the way, the add-on Power Sequencer doesn't add much in that regards because the navigation tools are quite robust by default. The only thing you have is the border select that makes it easier to override your selection instantly. It won't change your active strip. That's something that's a bit hard to do at the moment, but it lets you quickly select a block and then you press the dot. You don't have to press A to cancel your selection before you use the border select.